I clapped as my grandson's name was called, the graduation program booklet trembling in my hands. For a brief moment, pride lit my chest, until his eyes found mine. His smile collapsed. In front of hundreds, he spat the words that cut deeper than any blade, "You don't belong here. Get out." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. The morning after the graduation, my house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, I welcomed silence. I'd make my coffee, set the mug beside the window, and let the morning birds do the talking. But that morning, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a weight pressing against my chest. Steam curled from the coffee pot, but it carried no comfort. On the counter, the graduation program booklet lay where I had tossed it the night before. Its folded edges were creased from how tightly I had gripped it during the ceremony. I should have thrown it away, but I couldn't. The glossy cover reflected the morning light like a mirror I didn't want to face. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. The chair across from me was empty. Martha used to sit there. She'd smile when our grandson accomplished anything. She would have cried with pride at his graduation. I thought about how her absence made the sting even sharper. I had no one to share that humiliation with except the four walls around me. The floor creaked behind me. My daughter, Amanda, entered the kitchen. She didn't look at me. She moved straight to the cupboard, pulled down a bowl, and poured cereal with mechanical detachment. Her movements were sharp, quick, like she was rehearsing an escape rather than making breakfast. I cleared my throat. He looked good in that gown. My voice was careful, searching for a thread of normal conversation. Amanda didn't answer. She kept pouring the milk, the splash sounding louder than it should have. Finally, she muttered, "He didn't want you there." The words sliced through the room, casual as they were. She didn't even look up when she said them. I forced myself to stay calm. He's my grandson. I had every right to be there. This time she did look up, but only to narrow her eyes. Rights don't matter if he doesn't want you in his life. You embarrassed him. Embarrassed him? The program booklet caught the sunlight again, reminding me of the moment his voice carried over the crowd. I clenched my jaw. I clapped. That's all I did. Amanda shrugged, spoon clinking against the bowl. Sometimes even your presence is too much. The cereal crackled as she pressed her spoon into it, each snap echoing in my ears like nails on glass. I tried to drink my coffee, but it tasted bitter, more like ash than anything roasted. I reached for the booklet on the counter. My hand hovered over it, but I didn't pick it up. Amanda's eyes flicked toward it, then back to me. "You should throw that away. Holding on to it won't change what," he said. Her voice was cold, stripped of warmth. For a moment, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger, one who lived in my house, shared my table, but no longer shared blood. The hallway creaked again, heavier this time. Harry, my son-in-law, emerged, adjusting his tie. His smirk was already set, like he had been practicing it in the mirror. "Morning," he said, "too cheerful, too loud. Big day ahead. Clients to meet, money to make. Unlike some of us, I don't have time to sulk." Amanda chuckled softly, covering her mouth with her hand, as if what he said was a harmless joke. But her eyes flicked toward me, sharp, guilty, complicit. I kept my voice steady. "You think being humiliated by my own grandson is something I should ignore?" Harry leaned on the counter, right next to the booklet, tapping it with his finger. "Maybe it's not about ignoring. Maybe it's about accepting. Times change. People change. Maybe you don't belong in every chapter of his life." His finger pressed the program's cover flat against the counter. The sound was soft, but it felt like a gavel striking wood. Amanda didn't defend me. She stirred her cereal, spoon circling endlessly, like a clock running down. I stared at Harry. My hands tightened around the mug until the ceramic burned against my palms. Be careful with your words. Harry grinned wider. I am careful. I'm just saying what everyone else is already thinking. I rose slowly, forcing each movement to be calm, deliberate. The chair legs scraped against the floor with a groan. I reached past him, lifted the program booklet from under his finger, and folded it once more. The crease deepened, making the glossy paper crumple like old skin. You don't speak for my family, I said quietly. Harry's grin faded for just a second, but then he chuckled again. Don't I? Seems like I do more than you think. Amanda pushed her bowl away, sighing as though the air itself was heavy. She didn't say a word in my defense. That silence was worse than anything Harry could have said. I left the kitchen, booklet in hand, my coffee cooling untouched on the table. But before I reached the stairs, I heard Harry's voice again, low, sharp, not meant for me but meant to sting. One way or another, we'll erase him. The words hung in the air, thicker than smoke. One way or another, we'll erase him. The next Sunday, I forced myself to go to church. Not because I wanted to, but because avoiding it would only feed the whispers. In a small town, silence is a story all its own. I pressed the graduation program booklet into my jacket pocket before I left, its edges cutting into my chest like a reminder I couldn't escape. The church bell rang as I approached, its tone too bright for the heaviness in my stomach. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, coffee, and old hymnals. People greeted one another with warm smiles, but when their eyes landed on me, the smiles faltered. Conversations dipped. A few nodded politely, but most turned away. I sat in my usual pew, third row from the back, left side by the aisle. Martha and I had sat there every Sunday for decades. I could almost hear her voice joining the choir, soft but steady. That memory should have comforted me, but instead, it cut deeper. I wasn't sitting with her anymore. I was sitting in the shadow of what my family had become. During fellowship, I carried my coffee cup carefully, moving through clusters of people who parted like water around a stone. No one said anything cruel aloud, but silence carries its own cruelty. I caught fragments of whispers. Grandson's graduation. Told him to leave. Maybe it's true, maybe he doesn't belong anymore. Each word pierced sharper than the last. My hand tightened on the cup until it shook, the hot liquid threatening to spill. That's when Harry appeared, all smiles and handshakes, as if he owned the room. Amanda walked beside him, quiet, eyes lowered, as though her husband's shadow was the only place she felt safe standing. They worked the crowd like seasoned politicians, greeting people, exchanging small jokes. Not one person laughed as warmly as they wanted, but that didn't stop them from trying. When they reached me, Harry's smile thinned into something colder. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. We're giving you one more chance. Either follow our rules at home, or leave. For good. The words were meant to be quiet, private, but Amanda's silence made them louder. She stood at his side, not correcting him, not defending me. Her eyes flickered briefly to mine, full of something I couldn't name, fear, maybe, or guilt, but then she turned away. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. This is my home, I said firmly. Harry's smirk sharpened. Not anymore. The family decides who belongs. And you don't. My grip on the coffee cup tightened so hard the styrofoam creaked. Behind us, conversations faltered again. People were listening now. They couldn't hear every word, but they could feel the tension, the heat radiating between us. Amanda finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad, maybe it's easier if you just listen to him. Her words were worse than silence. They were a verdict. I stared at her, searching for the daughter I had raised, the one who used to cling to my hand in this very church, the one who cried when Martha passed, the one who swore family meant everything. But the woman in front of me was someone else entirely. The program booklet dug into my chest through my jacket, its edges sharp against my ribs. I slid my hand over it, grounding myself. That folded piece of paper had witnessed my grandson's rejection. Now it was witnessing my daughter's betrayal. I lowered my voice, steady but heavy. "You'll regret this." Harry leaned closer, his breath hot with coffee and arrogance. "No, old man. You will." Around us, the silence broke into murmurs. Neighbors pretended not to watch, but I could feel every eye on me. One old friend, Paul, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between us. Mrs. Reynolds, who used to bring Martha pies after Sunday service, shook her head slowly, sadness in her eyes. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was public. My own blood had cornered me in God's house and handed me an ultimatum. Obey, or be erased. I set my coffee cup down on the table beside me. My hands no longer trembled. My heart was still pounding, but it pounded with something sharper than shame. Something closer to resolve. Amanda reached out as if to soften her words, but her hand dropped halfway. She let it fall uselessly at her side. That tiny movement, that half-hearted attempt, told me everything I needed to know. She had already chosen her side. I walked away from them, down the aisle toward the door. The program booklet shifted in my pocket with each step, crinkling against the fabric, reminding me of its presence, its weight. The eyes of the congregation followed me, some pitying, some judgmental, some merely curious. But before I reached the door, I heard Harry's voice again, pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. "He doesn't belong here. Not even in his own family." The words echoed off the walls, bouncing through stained glass and wooden pews. They landed heavy, not just in my ears, but in the ears of everyone around us. I kept walking, but inside, something hardened. They thought they had shamed me into silence. They thought they had cornered me. They hadn't realized yet, I was just beginning. Harry's words echoed, "He doesn't belong here. Not even in his own family." The Monday after that church scene, I woke earlier than usual. My sleep had been shallow, broken by fragments of whispers and the memory of Harry's voice echoing through the sanctuary, "He doesn't belong here." The words wouldn't let me rest. I brewed coffee, but it didn't warm me. I sat at the table, staring at the folded graduation program booklet lying next to the sugar jar. The paper edges had begun to curl. I pressed them flat with my palm, the way you try to control something that refuses to stay down. It reminded me of myself, creased, bent, but not yet torn. As I sipped, the mail slot rattled. Envelopes slid across the floor. I shuffled to collect them, expecting bills, the usual junk, maybe a bank statement. But as I scanned through, my eyes froze. One envelope bore my bank seal, stamped urgent. My stomach tightened. I tore it open. Inside, the words blurred for a moment, but one line stood out. Insufficient funds to cover automatic withdrawal. My hand went cold. I sat down, read it again, slower. It listed my mortgage account. The payment hadn't cleared. I set the envelope beside the program booklet. Both looked like accusations. I grabbed the checkbook from the drawer. The last check I had written wasn't for the mortgage. It was for groceries, signed over to Amanda because she claimed she was doing me a favor by picking them up. She had insisted on handling the shopping these last few months, saying it was easier that way. I hadn't thought twice about it. The kitchen door creaked. Harry walked in, tie loose, sleeves rolled. Amanda followed, clutching her phone like a shield. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "The mortgage didn't clear." "Why?" Harry smirked, pulling a glass from the cabinet. "Because I moved things around." "Relax, old man, I've got it under control." "Moved things around?" I repeated. My voice stayed low, but inside my chest something snapped. That account is mine. Amanda stepped in quickly. Dad, it's easier if Harry manages it. He's good with numbers. He just wants to help. Help? I pushed the envelope across the table toward them. Is this your idea of help? An overdue notice? Harry sipped his water, calm as ever. One bounced payment isn't the end of the world. I've been redirecting funds, making investments. In the long run, you'll thank me. My fist tightened around the edge of the table. Without asking me? He shrugged. You wouldn't understand the details anyway. Times have changed. Money works differently now. Amanda's eyes darted to mine, pleading silently for me not to argue. But her silence was just another wound. The program booklet caught my eye again, its folded spine aligned with the overdue letter. Both of them sat there, two pieces of paper, two symbols of how little respect I commanded in my own house. I tapped the envelope. That mortgage is my responsibility. Not yours. From now on, you don't touch my accounts. Harry's grin widened, wolfish. You really think you can stop me? His words were soft, but they carried the weight of a challenge. Amanda placed her hand on his arm. Please, both of you, let's not fight. But Harry wasn't finished. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a knife's edge. Truth is, you've been holding us back. Amanda and I deserve the future, not your old-fashioned rules. You should be grateful I haven't drained everything already. For a second, the room blurred. I heard Martha's voice in memory, warning me years ago, don't hand over too much. Protect what you built. I had ignored her, believing family was unbreakable. Now I saw how wrong I'd been. I stood slowly, sliding the booklet and the overdue notice together, folding them in half. They crumpled slightly under my fingers. Touch my accounts again, and you'll regret it. Amanda flinched at the tone in my voice, but Harry only chuckled. We'll see, old man. He brushed past me, his shoulder striking mine deliberately, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Amanda lingered a moment longer, eyes wet, lips parted as if she wanted to say something. But she didn't. She followed him out like a shadow bound to his steps. Left alone, I unfolded the booklet and the overdue letter, laying them side by side. Both bore creases now. Both carried my shame. But they also carried something else, a reminder. Paper burns easily, but the truth carved into it lasts longer. I pressed my hand flat on top of them, steadying myself. This wasn't just carelessness. This was theft in plain sight. And if they thought I was too old, too weak, too foolish to fight back, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Father realizes his accounts are being drained, someone's stealing in his name. Dinner that evening felt less like a meal and more like a trial. The table was set with care, Amanda's touch, no doubt, but the air carried no warmth. Plates clattered too sharply, forks scraped like accusations, and every glance across the table seemed to carry hidden words. The graduation program booklet lay folded in my jacket pocket, pressing against my chest with each breath, like a witness waiting to be called. Harry sat at the head of the table, though that had always been my seat. He carved the roast with exaggerated precision, every slice a small insult. Amanda passed him dishes, her face tight, her movements careful. My grandson, Luke, scrolled on his phone, barely glancing up. The glow of the screen lit his face brighter than any candle could. I reached for the potatoes. Before my hand even touched the bowl, Harry's voice cut through the clinking silverware. Let's make this simple, he said. You either follow the rules of this house, or you leave. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Their weight landed heavier than thunder. Amanda set down her fork, eyes darting between us. She didn't speak. Silence was its own form of agreement. I looked at her first, then at Harry. "Rules?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "Whose rules?" Harry leaned back in his chair, knife glinting in his hand. "Mine. From now on, you don't make decisions here. Not about money. Not about the house. Not about Luke. You either accept that, or you walk out." The knife slipped through the roast with a sound that made the hair on my arms rise. Luke finally glanced up, expression flat, bored, as though none of this mattered. That indifference cut more deeply than Harry's words. Amanda reached across, touching Harry's wrist. "Please, not like this." But the plea was weak, more habit than conviction. I set my fork down slowly, deliberately. The clink against the plate sounded louder than it should have. "This is my house," I said. "I built it with my own hands. I paid for every brick, every shingle." Harry smirked. "And now you're just living in it. Times change. Ownership doesn't mean authority." Amanda's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Dad, it'll be easier if you just listen to him." Her words landed like a verdict. Easier. For whom? Not for me. Certainly not for the man I had been all my life. The program booklet in my pocket seemed to crinkle louder, the paper bending with the tension in my chest. I pressed my palm against it, steadying myself. "You want me gone," I said softly. Harry's grin widened. "If you can't follow the rules, yes. Pack your things. We'll manage without you." The room tilted, not because I was weak, but because the betrayal was so complete. My own daughter, my grandson, my blood, watching me stand trial at my own table. Amanda dropped her gaze. Luke's fingers tapped on his screen. Harry raised his glass in a mock toast. "To progress," he said. The glass clicked against his teeth. That sound, careless, hollow, snapped something inside me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. Instead, I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the floor like a warning bell. Amanda flinched. Harry smirked, certain he had won. I stood, reaching into my jacket. For a moment, they thought I might slam the program booklet onto the table as evidence of all the disrespect I had endured. But I didn't. I slipped it deeper into my pocket, close to my heart. "I'll make it easy for you," I said. My voice was steady, almost too steady. "You want me gone? Fine." Amanda gasped. "Dad." But I cut her off with a look. I had begged enough in my life. That night, I wasn't going to. Harry leaned forward, elbows on the table, smile sharp. "So you'll pack your bags?" I met his gaze, unblinking. "No. I'll do something better." For the first time all evening, his smirk faltered. Amanda's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto the plate. Luke's eyes finally rose from his screen, curiosity flickering across his face. I turned from the table, my footsteps measured, deliberate. In the hallway, the old clock ticked loudly, each second stretching like a drumbeat. I opened the closet, pulled out my suitcase, and set it on the floor. The zipper's rasp echoed down the hallway like a blade being unsheathed. Back at the table, silence spread. Amanda's breath caught. Harry chuckled nervously, trying to mask it with arrogance. "They thought I would beg," I whispered to myself as I folded shirts, slid in a framed photo of Martha, and tucked the program booklet between them like a final seal. When I returned to the doorway, suitcase in hand, their faces told me everything. Harry expected resistance. Amanda expected tears. Luke expected nothing at all. But none of them expected this. They thought I would bend. Instead, I smiled, and reached for my suitcase. The suitcase zipper rasped like thunder through the hallway. I had heard many sounds in this house, laughter, music, Martha's voice filling every corner, but that metallic rasp was the loneliest sound of all. It was the sound of a man leaving what was once his own kingdom. I packed slowly, methodically. Shirts folded with precision, socks rolled tight, the framed photo of Martha slipped carefully between layers of clothes. My hands trembled only when I reached for the graduation program booklet. It was creased and folded, scarred from my grip, but I laid it gently atop the clothes as though it were priceless. That paper had witnessed my humiliation, my rejection, my erasure. Now it would witness my departure. From the kitchen came the low murmur of voices. Harry's laugh, sharp, smug, punctuated Amanda's whispers. I couldn't catch every word, but one phrase cut through. Once he's out, we'll have everything. The walls of my home seemed to shrink inward at those words. I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was final, like a judge striking the gavel. Carrying it down the hallway, I looked at the photographs on the wall, Martha holding Amanda as a child, Luke grinning with ice cream smeared on his face, me in my work clothes, proud and tired. Each frame was a nail hammered into my chest. At the front door, Amanda appeared. Her eyes were wide, her hand half raised as though to stop me, but her voice betrayed her hesitation. "Dad, you don't have to." Harry stepped up behind her, arms folded. "Let him. This house isn't big enough for all of us." Amanda's hand dropped. Silence said more than any words could. I rolled the suitcase out onto the porch. The wheels clicked against the wooden boards, every sound echoing into the quiet evening. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan, my neighbor of 30 years, stood watering her flowers. She froze, hose dangling in her hand, watching me drag a suitcase from my own front door. Her eyes widened with recognition. She mouthed something I couldn't hear. And just like that, the rumor began. I gave her a small nod, but my throat was too tight for words. I walked past the hedge I had trimmed every summer, past the driveway where Luke had learned to ride his bike, past the mailbox where Martha used to leave notes for the postman. Every step felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. At the bus station, the clerk barely looked up when I rolled the suitcase to the counter. "One way?" he asked, voice flat. I slid a bill across the counter. He glanced at the suitcase, then at my face. Recognition flickered. His eyes softened. But he didn't speak, he didn't need to. By nightfall, the whole town would know I had left my own home with nothing but a suitcase. The motel smelled of stale carpet and cleaning solution. The lamp buzzed weakly when I switched it on. I set the suitcase on the bed, unzipped it, and lifted the program booklet. I laid it on the desk like a war map, its creases casting long shadows in the dim light. I sat in the stiff chair, turned on my laptop, and logged into my bank account. The screen glowed harsh in the dark room. Numbers flickered to life, but they weren't right. Transactions I didn't recognize. Transfers I hadn't approved. And then, one detail that froze me. Harry's name listed as an authorized user. My jaw tightened. My hand hovered over the mouse. The overdue mortgage notice lay beside the program booklet, both of them symbols of betrayal now stitched into my reality. I clicked through each account, scrolling faster, heart pounding louder with every line. Then it appeared, an alert flashing in bold red. Overdue payment, immediate attention required. The letters blinked on the screen, urgent and merciless, the same way Harry's smirk had burned itself into my memory. I leaned back in the chair, the creak echoing through the empty room. They thought throwing me out was victory. They thought silence was surrender. But silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The red overdue notice pulsed on my screen. They thought they had erased me, but they had just given me the weapon I needed. By sunrise, the motel room felt less like a place to sleep and more like a war room. The curtains hung half shut, letting in only a sliver of light. Dust floated through the beam, slow and heavy, like time itself was dragging its feet. My suitcase rested open on the chair, clothes spilling slightly, but I didn't care. All my focus was on the desk, on the laptop, the overdue notice, and the graduation program booklet lying flat between them. Its creases cast shadows across the paper, like trenches on a battlefield. Every time I glanced at it, I remembered Luke's voice at graduation, "You don't belong here. Get out." Maybe he thought those words had buried me. Instead, they had planted something darker, stronger. I opened my bank account again. The red overdue warning glared back, pulsing like an alarm. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt control. My hand steadied on the mouse. The first click was small, just a single cancellation. I stopped the automatic transfer for the mortgage. The confirmation screen popped up, payment cancelled. The click of the enter key felt like pulling a trigger. I leaned back, listening to the quiet hum of the motel fridge. For the first time in years, I wasn't paying to keep someone else comfortable while they spat in my face. But one strike wasn't enough. Not for what they'd done. I opened the insurance portal next. Amanda's car, Harry's pride, polished every Saturday morning in my driveway, was under my plan. With a few keystrokes, I removed it. The policy terminated instantly. I pictured Harry behind the wheel, grinning at his reflection in the rearview mirror, never realizing that safety net was gone. My hands moved faster now. Utilities. I cancelled the gas account, the electricity autopay. The screen flashed warnings, termination will occur within 24 hours. I smiled, imagining the lights flickering out during one of Harry's meetings, his polished image cracking under fluorescent failure. The program booklet slipped slightly under my wrist as I typed, its edges crinkling. I flattened it again, pressing hard this time, as though pinning my resolve in place. Next, I checked the grocery transfers. For months, I had been sending extra funds to Amanda under the excuse of household expenses. My account showed the steady deductions, like a drip feed of my own lifeblood. With one motion, I shut it down. The silence in the room deepened. It wasn't the silence of loss anymore, it was the silence of freedom. I sat back, staring at the balance left in my account. For the first time in years, it was mine. Entirely mine. I thought of Martha then. She used to worry I gave too much, that I let love blind me to the way people took advantage. I had always waved her concerns away. Their family, I used to say. But now, in the glow of the laptop screen, I heard her voice clearly, protect what you built. The war room felt colder, but my chest felt lighter. I closed the laptop and picked up the program booklet. Its paper was warm from the desk lamp, edges softening with every touch. I stared at Luke's name printed inside. Once, I had thought that name was my legacy. Now it was just ink, fading faster than I wanted to admit. The motel phone rang suddenly, slicing through the silence. I didn't move to answer. I let it ring, each shrill tone confirming that they had already begun to notice. By nightfall, Harry's office would call when his card was declined. The mortgage company would demand payment he couldn't provide. The insurance agent would send a cancellation letter. And the lights in my house, would start to flicker, reminding him of the storm he had invited. I placed the program booklet back on the desk, smoothing it flat one last time. You wanted me erased, I whispered. Instead, I'll make you vanish. By nightfall, their phones would ring, their bills would bounce, and my silence would be deafening. Tell me, what would you do in this situation? I'd love to know. By Wednesday morning, my motel phone had already lit up with missed calls. My cell, 23 voicemails, one after another, each marked with Amanda's number or Harry's. I didn't answer. I brewed the motel's weak coffee instead, poured it into a paper cup, and sat at the desk where the graduation program booklet still lay. Its creases had deepened from the weight of my hand pressing it flat the night before. I pressed my thumb along the spine until it almost tore. Stay steady, I told myself. Don't soften now. The first voicemail came in on Tuesday afternoon. Amanda's voice, tight but controlled. Dad, the bank says the mortgage payment bounced. Can you fix it? Her tone was polite, almost rehearsed, like she was asking for a small favor. I deleted it after the first play. The second voicemail, not long after, was Harry's. His voice was hot, mocking, but there was panic underneath. What game are you playing, old man? The car insurance is gone, my card got declined at lunch. Don't think you can pull this crap and get away with it. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the booklet's faded ink. His anger didn't sting. It confirmed I had struck the right nerve. By Tuesday evening, the calls multiplied. Amanda again, this time her voice trembling. Dad, please. The lights flickered during dinner. Luke was scared. Just turn the payments back on. Please. I paused before deleting that one. For a second, I almost replayed it. The sound of her fear wasn't directed at me, it was at Harry. I could hear it in the way her voice broke. But I didn't replay it. I deleted it too. Wednesday morning, Harry's fury had grown into desperation. You think you're punishing me? You're punishing her. You're punishing your grandson. You want people to think you're a hero? You're just bitter. The words washed over me. For the first time in years, their problems weren't mine. I left the phone buzzing and walked to the diner down the street. The bell above the door jingled, the smell of bacon and old coffee wrapping around me. A couple of locals sat in booths, whispering low. One of them glanced at me, then back at his eggs, but I caught the look, curiosity mixed with recognition. Morning, Mr. Grant, the waitress said, setting down a chipped mug. Rough week? I only nodded. No need to explain. By now, whispers were doing the work for me. Back in the motel, I played one more voicemail. Amanda's voice again. But this time, something different. You said you'd fix this, Harry. You promised. Dad, please answer, he doesn't know what he's doing. Her anger wasn't directed at me. It was at him. For the first time, her loyalty cracked. I stared at the program booklet, tracing the crease with my finger. The paper had grown soft, fragile from being handled too much. Like her, it was beginning to show wear. The afternoon passed quietly. I sipped the last of the motel coffee, stale and bitter, and walked the empty hallway. Outside, the neon sign flickered, humming faintly in the wind. The silence was thick, but inside it, I felt calm. Until the knock came. It wasn't polite, not gentle. 3 sharp bangs rattled the thin motel door. The kind of knock that wasn't asking, it was demanding. I froze for a moment, staring at the peephole. Shadows stretched under the doorframe. A man's voice muttered something I couldn't catch. Then Amanda's voice, louder, strained, desperate. Dad, please. Just open the door. My heart thudded, slow and heavy. I slid the program booklet into my jacket pocket, its edges creasing deeper against the fabric. My fingers lingered on it, grounding me. I stepped closer to the door but didn't open it. Through the peephole, their figures blurred in the dim hallway light. Harry's broad stance, Amanda clutching her arms tight against herself. They looked different now, less like family, more like intruders. The knocking grew sharper. Harry's voice carried through the thin wood. You can't hide in there forever. We'll make you pay for this. Amanda's voice overlapped, softer, pleading. Dad, please. Just talk to us. 2 voices, one angry, one breaking, bleeding through the same door. Through the peephole, I saw them both, desperate shadows on the other side. A sharp knock rattled the motel door again, harder this time. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, the program booklet heavy in my jacket pocket. My heart thudded, but not with fear. With anticipation. I stepped closer, peered through the peephole. Amanda's face, pale and drawn, filled part of the glass. Beside her, Harry shifted impatiently, fists clenching, his jaw tight. They weren't here for reconciliation. They were here for war. I slid the latch halfway, cracked the door just enough for my eyes to meet theirs. "What do you want?" My voice was calm, colder than I expected. Harry shoved his way forward, but I braced my foot against the bottom of the door. He sneered. "You think you can just cut us off? You're ruining everything over your pride." Amanda's voice overlapped his, trembling. "Dad, please, just listen. We can work this out." I shook my head slowly. "Work this out? You gave me an ultimatum. I followed it." Harry barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Don't twist this around. You're punishing your own family." I opened the door another inch, enough to let the hallway light spill across the floor. Behind them, I noticed shadows, 2 motel guests lingering, curious. The fallout was no longer private. This would be witnessed. "Family?" I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. Family doesn't drain bank accounts in secret. Family doesn't erase their own blood. Amanda flinched, hugging her arms tight. Harry stepped closer, filling the doorway with his broad frame. His breath smelled of cheap whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. "You're not thinking straight," he said. "You're old. You don't understand how money works now. I was trying to secure our future." I let his words hang in the air. Then I tilted my head, watching him closely. "Funny," I said quietly. "Because the banker told me you tried to take out a $50,000 loan. Using my house as collateral." The silence that followed was thunderous. Amanda turned her head sharply toward him. "What?" Harry's smirk faltered. His lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped fully into the doorway now, the motel lamp behind me casting my shadow long across the hall. "You didn't just betray me. You lied to her too." Amanda's face drained of color. She stared at him, eyes wide. "Harry, tell me that's not true." He tried to recover, but his voice cracked. "It was just paperwork, an opportunity. I was going to pay it back." Her voice rose, shaking. "With what? With Dad's house? With money that isn't yours?" The 2 motel guests down the hall were whispering now, eyes locked on us. Doors cracked open further. This wasn't just an argument, it was exposure. Harry's temper snapped. He jabbed a finger at me. "This is your fault. If you'd just signed things when I asked." "Signed?" Amanda's voice broke. "You forged his signature, didn't you?" His silence was the answer. Tears welled in her eyes. She turned to me, voice trembling. "Dad. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." I studied her face, the cracks finally showing in her loyalty. For a moment, I almost softened. But then I felt the booklet pressing against my ribs, its creased spine reminding me of every word, every humiliation, every betrayal. I straightened. "You asked me to obey. To leave. To erase myself. Instead, I'm erasing you. Legally. Permanently." Harry's fists clenched. His voice dropped to a low growl. "You'll regret this. You can't fight me forever." Amanda stepped back, eyes darting between us, caught in the collapse of her own choices. I leaned closer, my words sharp and clear. "You gave me an ultimatum. I chose silence. Now I choose war." For a moment, the hallway was silent except for the hum of the motel lights. The guests whispered louder, one muttering, "Did he say forgery?" Harry's eyes darted toward them, realizing what he had exposed. His hand twitched like he wanted to swing, but Amanda caught his arm. "Stop. You've done enough." I pulled the door wider now, not inviting them in, but forcing their shame into the open air. "Go home, Harry. Every step you take from here only makes it worse." Amanda's lips parted, but no words came. She looked like she wanted to reach for me, but instead, she turned away, following him as he stormed down the hall. Before they disappeared, Harry twisted back toward me. His eyes burned with a desperation I'd never seen. His last words weren't shouted, they were whispered, but they carried more weight than any threat. "This isn't over. And promises from desperate men are the most dangerous." The hallway emptied, but the echoes of his voice lingered. I touched the booklet in my pocket, its edges digging deeper into my chest. The paper had transformed, it was no longer just a memory of rejection. It was evidence, a record of every betrayal that would soon be brought to light. His last words weren't a threat, they were a promise. And promises from desperate men are the most dangerous. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you even more. By Monday morning, the motel room smelled of burnt coffee and stale air. I hadn't slept much. Harry's last words still echoed in my head, "This isn't over." Desperate men kept their promises in dangerous ways. That alone was enough reason for me to move faster. I dressed carefully, pressed shirt, steady tie, polished shoes. If they wanted me erased, I would walk into the courthouse looking like a man carved from stone. Before leaving, I slipped the graduation program booklet into my jacket pocket. Its creases were deeper now, the paper softened from handling, but I carried it as both shield and reminder. The courthouse was cool, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood. The marble floor echoed with each step I took. I approached the clerk's desk, my folder of documents in hand. "Good morning," she said, eyes flicking from my face to the thick stack of papers I carried. "I'm here to file an eviction," I said. "And a restraining order." Her brows lifted, but she didn't question me. She took the documents, flipping through them. Deeds, receipts, mortgage statements, decades of proof that every brick of that house belonged to me, not them. "You're sure?" she asked quietly, looking up. "Against your own daughter?" The question pierced, but my answer came steady. "Yes. I gave them chances. This is my final boundary." Her stamp struck the paper with a heavy thunk, like a gavel declaring judgment. "Then it begins today." I signed where she pointed. Each stroke of my pen felt like severing a chain. For years, I had signed checks to keep them afloat. Now, I was signing their eviction. From the courthouse, I walked 2 blocks to the police station. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in cold white. An officer behind the desk looked up as I approached. "What can I help you with, sir?" I set another folder down. "I'd like to report attempted fraud and harassment." The officer scanned the documents I provided, bank statements, the loan application Harry had tried to push through under my name. The forged signature stared back at us both, sloppy but dangerous. "Do you have reason to believe they'll retaliate?" he asked. I met his eyes. "They already have." "And he promised it isn't over." He nodded, jaw tightening. "We'll keep watch. If he shows up again, call us immediately. They can't cross lines now. Not legally." I thanked him and turned to leave. In the waiting area, a man I vaguely recognized from the hardware store caught my eye. He leaned toward another officer, whispering, "That's Grant, isn't it? Heard his son-in-law's been forging papers." The words carried just loud enough for others to hear. Heads turned. Whispers began. The story had spread further than I imagined. Outside, sunlight cut across the courthouse steps. I paused, slipping my hand into my pocket, fingers brushing the folded program booklet. Once, it had been the mark of my humiliation. Now, I realized, it was becoming something else entirely, a record of my endurance. I thought of Amanda, her face pale when she discovered Harry's forgery. There was doubt in her eyes now, cracks forming in her loyalty. But doubt was not enough to erase betrayal. I descended the courthouse steps, each footfall sharp, deliberate. I wasn't the man they had cornered at the dinner table. I wasn't the humiliated figure standing in church. I was a man with the law behind him, with documents and signatures sharper than any blade Harry could wield. That afternoon, I sat in the diner, sipping black coffee. The whispers came again, but this time, they carried a different tone. We heard he filed eviction papers. Can you imagine? Against his own daughter. Well, after what Harry did, can you blame him? The program booklet lay folded beside my mug, its edges brushing against the ceramic, catching a drop of coffee that bled into the paper. I didn't move it. Let it stain. It was proof that even symbols could transform. As I rose to leave, the bell above the diner door jingled. I turned, and there they were. Amanda and Harry. They froze when they saw me. Conversations around us dimmed, people pretending not to listen but leaning in closer. Harry's voice cut the air, lower than before but still sharp. What have you done? Amanda's eyes flicked from my face to the papers under my arm. Her lips parted, but no words came. I held her gaze, calm and steady. I've drawn the line. When I turned from the counter, they were already there, waiting, desperate to rewrite the story. By Thursday, the cracks in their lives were no longer whispers, they were headlines in our small-town rumor mill. Every stoplight, every grocery aisle, every pew at church carried the same story. Harry had been caught forging documents, and Amanda had stood by him until the truth spilled into the open. I sat in the diner again, same booth by the window. The waitress poured coffee into my mug, her glance lingering longer than before. Heard the creditors were at your place this morning, she said softly. Guess Harry's charm wore off quick. I nodded once. The coffee steamed, curling in front of me. I didn't need sugar to taste the bitterness. Through the window, I watched as Harry stormed across the street. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, his once confident stride reduced to jerks of frustration. Amanda trailed behind him, her face pale, her shoulders hunched. A man in a gray suit, one of the bank's debt collectors, followed close behind, a clipboard in hand. They stopped right outside the diner. The collector's voice carried through the glass. Mr. Turner, this is your third missed payment. You can't hide behind borrowed money forever. Harry's voice rose, desperate. I just need more time. Time doesn't print checks, the man replied flatly. Amanda's hand clutched Harry's arm, but he yanked it away. Her eyes darted toward the diner, toward me. For the first time in months, she looked not like an accomplice, but like a woman realizing the ground beneath her had disappeared. Inside, I pulled the graduation program booklet from my jacket. Its ink had begun to fade, the names printed inside smudged from my fingers, as though time itself was erasing what had once been permanent. I traced Luke's name, thinking of how pride had turned to rejection in a single breath. The waitress glanced at the booklet. That from graduation? I nodded. My voice came quiet, but steady. Proof that even memories can sour. The collector's tone sharpened outside. We'll be seizing assets if this isn't resolved immediately. Job loss doesn't excuse fraud. Job loss. I hadn't known. My chest tightened, but not from sympathy, only from confirmation. The facade had finally shattered. Amanda's voice cracked through the air. Harry, what have you done to us? He turned on her, venom in his eyes. What I had to. You think your father cares? He left us to rot. His words bled into the diner. A couple at the next booth exchanged looks, whispering. The community wasn't on his side anymore. I stood slowly, leaving cash for the coffee. The program booklet slipped back into my jacket. As I stepped outside, the air felt heavier, buzzing with unspoken judgment from every passerby. Amanda turned to me instantly, her face streaked with tears. "Dad. I didn't know it was this bad." Her words cracked like brittle glass. For a moment, I searched her eyes for sincerity. Perhaps there was some, but sincerity didn't erase betrayal. Harry stepped between us, voice low and trembling. "This isn't over. You might have the law, but you don't have family. Without that, you've got nothing." I met his glare, the booklet pressing against my ribs. My reply came sharp, final. "They wanted my signature, but they signed away my love long ago." The crowd murmured, whispers rippling like wind across wheat. A woman shook her head. A man muttered, "He's right." Amanda reached for me, but I stepped back. Her hand hovered in the empty air, trembling. Harry snarled, grabbing her arm, dragging her toward the car. The collector followed, jotting notes on his clipboard, indifferent to the spectacle. As they left, Amanda glanced back once more, her eyes a storm of regret and fear. But it was too late. The cracks had widened. The mask had fallen. I turned away, heading down the street. The program booklet shifted in my pocket, its faded ink smudging against the fabric. It no longer felt like humiliation, it felt like a ledger, recording every debt they had built. And debts, sooner or later, always came due. As they drove off, I knew the next time we met, it wouldn't be in anger, it would be in judgment. By Saturday evening, the diner was fuller than usual. Families crowded into booths, kids swung their legs beneath tables, and the hum of conversation floated beneath the soft clatter of plates. I sat in my usual booth by the window, black coffee in hand. The graduation program booklet rested beside the mug, edges worn, its ink fading. It had become more than paper, it was my ledger, my silent witness. The door jingled open, and conversations dipped instantly. Harry and Amanda walked in. Or rather, Harry stormed in and Amanda followed. His shoulders were stiff, his face tight with anger. She looked hollow, her eyes rimmed red, her steps hesitant. The diner buzzed as heads turned. This wasn't just a family drama anymore, it was a community spectacle. Harry's voice cut across the room before he even reached my table. "You think you've beaten me? You think a few papers and signatures make you king?" Forks clinked against plates. A mother hushed her child. Everyone was listening now. I didn't move. I kept my hand wrapped around the coffee mug, steady. "You forged my name. You drained my accounts. You lied. And now you're paying the price." Amanda tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "Harry, please. Not here." But Harry wasn't whispering anymore. He pointed a finger at me, his voice sharp and rising. "He's turned everyone against us. He made me lose my job, my reputation, he made you pity him instead of standing with your husband." Murmurs rippled through the diner. One man at the counter said under his breath, "He did that to himself." Amanda's voice cracked. "Stop, Harry. Just stop." But Harry slammed his hand on my table, rattling the mug, nearly knocking the program booklet to the floor. The paper trembled, but I pressed it flat with my palm, holding it steady, the way I held myself. "You think this little paper shield protects you?" Harry sneered, eyes darting to the booklet. "It's nothing. You're nothing." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a thin smile. "You mistook my silence for weakness. You mistook my patience for surrender. But this," I tapped the booklet, "this is proof. Proof of every word, every humiliation, every betrayal." Amanda's face crumpled. Tears spilled, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Dad, please, stop fighting. Please." Harry turned on her, his anger boiling over. You're crying for him? After everything I've done for us? The crowd stiffened. No one touched their food now. The diner had turned into a courtroom, every customer a jury member. The waitress, brave enough to speak, stepped forward. You should go, Harry. You're making a scene. Harry's laugh was harsh, jagged. A scene? He's the one tearing this family apart. I rose slowly, sliding the booklet into my jacket pocket. The weight of it pressed against me, grounding me. Family tears itself apart when respect is gone. You wanted me erased, Harry. But now you're the one disappearing. Amanda covered her face, shoulders shaking. The silence in the room was thicker than smoke. Harry's fury sputtered under the weight of it. His words didn't land anymore. The crowd wasn't with him, they were against him. A voice from the back broke the silence. You should be ashamed. Another added, we thought better of you, Amanda. She wept harder. Harry's face twisted, but even he couldn't fight against the tide of public judgment. I stepped past him, coffee mug still warm in my hand, program booklet pressing against my heart. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back just once. Harry stood trembling, fists clenched but powerless. Amanda stood broken, head bowed, tears staining her cheeks. The entire diner stared at them like witnesses to a downfall. I opened the door, the bell above jingling bright against the heavy silence. As I stepped into the cool night air, I realized, this wasn't humiliation anymore. This was exposure. And it was only the beginning. Sunday morning broke with a heavy sky, gray clouds pressing low as though the world itself carried the weight of judgment. I dressed deliberately, clean shirt, polished shoes, steady tie. In my hand, I carried two things, a folder thick with legal papers, and the graduation program booklet, folded, creased, and worn almost to tissue. At the lawyer's office, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the smell of ink and paper filled the air. Mr. Daniels, my attorney, waited behind a mahogany desk stacked with documents. He was a calm man, mid-50s, glasses perched on the end of his nose, the kind who measured words like currency. You've brought everything? He asked. I set the folder on his desk. Every receipt, every deed, every account statement. And every signature Harry tried to forge. He flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. He overplayed his hand. This isn't just fraud, it's theft. And we have proof. From my jacket, I pulled out the program booklet and set it on top of the pile. Daniels glanced at it, confused. Sentimental? He asked. I shook my head. Symbolic. It started here. It ends here. His eyes softened, but he didn't press further. Instead, he slid one final document toward me, a revised will. I had asked him to prepare it quietly. My estate, my savings, even the house, no longer destined for Amanda or Harry. Instead, every asset was redirected to a scholarship fund, one that would bear my grandson Luke's name. Are you certain? Daniels asked. I traced the fading ink on the program booklet before I answered. If blood turns against you, you leave them nothing but the memory of what they destroyed. Dignity is the only inheritance I'll pass down. I signed with a steady hand. Each stroke of ink felt heavier than the last, carving judgment into permanence. Daniels leaned back, folding his hands. It's done. When the sheriff delivers the papers tomorrow, their world collapses. Financially, legally, and publicly. I nodded, sliding the booklet back into my pocket. That's the point. Later that afternoon, I walked into town. The air was thick with gossip, but this time, the whispers weren't about me. They were about Harry, lost job, debts, fraud, humiliation in the diner. Every eye that met mine carried something new, respect. Not sympathy, not pity, respect. At the post office, I mailed a copy of the will to Daniels for safekeeping. The clerk gave me a long look. "Heard you finally put your foot down." I simply said, "About time." By evening, I stood outside my house, the house I had built brick by brick. The lights were dim, curtains drawn. I could hear muffled voices inside, sharp, tense, strained. I knocked once. The door opened to Amanda's tear-streaked face. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice cracked. I stepped past her into the living room. Harry stood by the fireplace, shoulders tight, eyes wild. On the coffee table lay stacks of overdue bills, credit notices, final warnings. Their empire of lies had turned to dust. "I'm here to end this," I said. Harry sneered, but his voice wavered. "You think some papers will break me?" I opened the folder, laid the will, eviction notice, and fraud documents on the table. Then, slowly, I placed the program booklet on top. Its creases spread across the pile like a seal of judgment. "This isn't about breaking you," I said, my voice sharp. "It's about erasing what you built on my back. The house, the money, the inheritance, you've lost it all. Every dollar, every brick, every drop of pride. Gone." Amanda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dad, no, please. Not the house." I cut her off. "You made your choice when you chose him over me." Harry lunged forward, but I held up the sheriff's notice, his name bold at the top. "Tomorrow morning, this gets served. And when it does, you'll be out on the street." His breath came ragged, fury mixing with panic. Amanda collapsed into the chair, sobbing, her hands covering her face. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking clock. I leaned forward, pressing the program booklet flat against the stack of papers. "This was your ultimatum, not mine. And this," I tapped the booklet, "is how it ends." Harry's fists trembled at his sides, but no words came. Amanda wept harder. The facade had collapsed entirely, every mask, every defense, gone. I gathered the papers, slipped the booklet back into my pocket, and turned to leave. My voice was calm as stone. "Tomorrow, the sheriff will see this deed first." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bouncing off the polished wooden benches. The smell of old paper and floor polish lingered in the air. I sat at the front, folder of documents at my side, the graduation program booklet tucked in my jacket pocket. Its edges pressed against my ribs like a heartbeat, reminding me why I was here. The bailiff called the case. My name. Harry's name. Amanda's. The words echoed, binding us together in a final reckoning. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, adjusted her glasses and looked over the paperwork Daniels had submitted. She flipped through the eviction order, the fraud documents, the revised will. Each page turned was a hammer falling. Harry sat across the aisle, his suit wrinkled, his tie askew. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. Amanda sat beside him, eyes swollen, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Mr. Grant," the judge said, her voice steady. "You're seeking both an eviction and a restraining order against your son-in-law, as well as legal recognition of financial fraud. You've submitted extensive documentation. Do you stand by this?" I rose, my hand brushing the booklet in my pocket. "I do, Your Honor." Harry shot to his feet. "He's lying. He's twisting everything. He's doing this to punish us, to humiliate me." The judge's gavel cracked once. "Sit down, Mr. Turner." Amanda's voice broke through next, trembling. "Dad, please, please don't do this. We'll change. I'll make sure he changes. Just, don't take everything away from us." Her tears spilled freely now, streaking her cheeks. The courtroom was silent except for her sobs. Every spectator, neighbors, townsfolk, even the clerk, watched closely. For a moment, my chest tightened. She was my daughter. The little girl who once clung to my hand in this very courthouse when she was scared. I thought of Martha, how she'd tell me not to harden completely, not to forget compassion. But then my hand pressed against the program booklet, creased and faded. I remembered Luke's words at graduation, "You don't belong here. Get out." I remembered Harry's smirk at my table, Amanda's silence in church, the ultimatum that broke me. I pulled the booklet from my pocket and laid it on the table in front of the judge. Its pages were soft, ink faded, edges worn thin. But when it landed, the sound was sharp, like evidence being entered into record. "This," I said, my voice carrying across the courtroom, "is the symbol of what they took from me. Respect. Dignity. Family. You asked me to erase myself. Instead, I erased you from everything that matters." Amanda sobbed harder, her body shaking. Harry muttered curses under his breath, his face red, his fists tight. The judge leaned forward, studying me carefully. "Mr. Grant, do you wish to reconsider? Family disputes are often best solved outside this room." I shook my head slowly. "They gave me an ultimatum. I'm only honoring it." The words hung heavy in the air. Even Amanda stopped crying long enough to look up at me, eyes wide with disbelief. The judge stamped the papers, one by one. Each thud echoed like a nail driven into wood. "The eviction stands. The restraining order is granted. Fraud charges will proceed pending further review. Court is adjourned." Harry leapt to his feet, shouting, "This isn't justice. This is betrayal." Amanda collapsed forward, her face buried in her hands. Her voice was muffled, broken. "Dad, please. Don't leave us like this." I picked up the program booklet, sliding it back into my pocket. My reply was calm, sharper than any shout. "You left me long before this day." The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Neighbors shook their heads, some nodding, some murmuring in shock. The community had witnessed everything, every plea, every refusal, every judgment. As the bailiff led Harry out, Amanda's eyes found mine one last time. She mouthed a single word through her tears, "Why?" I didn't answer. The booklet pressed against my chest was the only answer she would ever get. As the gavel echoed, I realized, the final judgment wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the community watching. The gavel's echo lingered long after the courtroom emptied. People filed out in hushed clusters, their whispers swelling like a tide. Some glanced at me as they passed, once with pity, now with something else. Respect. The kind you don't ask for, but earn when you stand your ground. I sat alone on the bench for a moment, letting the silence settle. The graduation program booklet pressed against my chest inside my jacket. It felt lighter now, not because it had changed, but because I had. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded. Neighbors stood in groups, whispering openly. The pastor from our church approached, his kind eyes heavy with understanding. "You did what had to be done, Grant. It wasn't cruelty. It was justice." I nodded, but my voice stayed quiet. "Justice doesn't feel as sweet as they promise." His reply was firm. "It feels right. That's better than sweet." Behind him, Amanda stood with her arms wrapped around herself, face pale, eyes red. Harry was nowhere to be seen, the sheriff had taken him through a side door. Amanda's gaze found me, desperate, pleading. But she didn't speak. She knew words could no longer change what had already been sealed. The crowd parted slightly as I descended the steps. Conversations hushed, then swelled again as I passed. I heard fragments. Stood his ground. About time someone put Harry in his place. I feel sorry for Amanda, but he warned her. Each whisper was a stone laid in the road I had chosen. At the bottom of the steps, Paul, an old friend from church, clapped me on the shoulder. "Proud of you, Grant. They tried to bury you, but you dug yourself out." I gave a thin smile. "I just stopped letting them dig." The sun broke through the clouds then, casting long shadows across the courthouse lawn. I walked slowly, breathing the air as though it were cleaner than before. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, my table again. The house was quiet, stripped of their presence. No whispers, no mockery, no ultimatums. Only the hum of the fridge and the tick of the old clock in the hallway. I set the folder of legal documents aside and pulled out the graduation program booklet. Its edges were worn smooth, the ink faded almost to nothing. Once, it had been the symbol of my rejection. Then, it became my proof of betrayal. Now, it was something else entirely. I laid it flat on the table and smoothed it with my palm. It no longer trembled beneath my hand. It rested still, like a wound that had finally scarred over. Tomorrow, Daniels would finalize the scholarship fund in Luke's name. My estate, my savings, my house, all redirected. He wouldn't inherit it through Harry or Amanda's greed. He would inherit it through dignity, through something untouchable. Family isn't blood. Family is respect. And dignity is the only inheritance worth leaving behind. The clock ticked once more, steady, measured. I folded the booklet carefully, slid it into the drawer beside Martha's old photograph, and closed it with a soft click. Outside, I could hear neighbors talking as they passed by, their voices not hushed but clear. Grant stood up. He kept his dignity. That's a man who didn't back down. The community had witnessed my humiliation, my betrayal, and my revenge. But more than that, they had witnessed my endurance. I leaned back in my chair, the silence finally feeling like peace. The program booklet rests beside Martha's photo, no longer a mark of shame but a quiet monument to dignity kept. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And dignity is the inheritance I chose to keep. If you liked this story, like the video, subscribe, and share your impressions in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.